Hey everyone, this is another re-release of a past Eager to Know episode. This is a compilation episode. It is a compilation of 6 songwriters that I had done interviews with, and I pulled all the highlights from the different interviews and combined them into this one episode, and it's pretty solid. I got to tell you, musicians are very interesting people, and their brains are wonderful to get inside of them, which is kind of the reason why I do the whole podcast. But having pulled all of the highlights from 6 different guys and combining them into this one concentrated 30-minute episode, it's a lot of good stuff. So please enjoy my interview with the Eager to Know songwriters. On this episode of Eager to Know, I have pulled together the highlights from my conversations with songwriters. Enjoy! And if you haven't already, be sure to explore all 6 full episodes of these past guests. First up is artist Paul Hamilton from the Eager to Know episode titled The Spirit of Sound.
I actually smell some sounds and I see color. Letters and notes are a specific color. So A is always red, like the red in your plaid shirt. It's bright stop sign red, or like the red on that. B is always orange. C is always yellow. D is black, etc., etc. And so when I see those notes on the actual musical stave, they also have that color. This is only in regards to like reading music, but when it comes to hearing music and playing it, it's completely different. And that's like 3-dimensional shapes that I see in my head, especially like string players and wind players. The shapes of the sound they literally look like 3-dimensional objects. I sat at my piano a couple of summers ago after having really had worked with this group. And I sat at my piano and I said, I don't want to play music anymore. I'm going to play sound, because people don't generally understand music. Like, they don't care that this piece is an E flat and that, the clarinet is transposed to, it's a B flat instrument, or this is a triad based on blah, 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 or the meter. Most people don't relate to that, but everybody can relate to sound. We have a senior citizens living center and that's local, and we'll have a rehearsal of about 4 to 6 musicians, and it's a wide variety of stuff. We might do a song from the 30s, a song from the 40s, then a classical piece, then, My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean. So we're doing songs and music that will be from roughly each decade of a person's life that, say, is now 75 to 80 years old. Wow. We'll have like a cellist, a pianist. We always have a pianist on the gig, a guitarist, a singer, and a flutist. That will be one combination. Then we have a short performance of about 45 to 50 minutes with these patients. One patient, he didn't remember the performance that we had, and it had only been about 10 or 15 minutes. And so I looked at his daughter and I said, let's ask him how he feels. And so I saw him that day. I said, hey, how's it feel? How's it going today? He says, oh, great. I said, how do you feel on a scale of 1 to 10? He says, like a 9. And I just looked at her and I said, there you go. Like, it's an afternoon and you're with your father, and for him, from his point of view, he feels like he's a 9. That's how good he feels. Whether he remembers the performance or not, that pleasure response when you listen to music, or you're going to see a great movie, that pleasure response that goes off in the brain doesn't just evaporate the instant the music's over. Mm-hmm. It lasts in the body. It's released into the body. So those chemicals, he still felt the benefit. And I'm serious about this. This is like profound, that he had relief in his physical body because of the music that he heard and doesn't remember, but he still had the benefit of it in his body for hours. Sound helps us feel. Music works on an intellectual level, especially for musicians. Like, when I listen to music, I listen to it musically sometimes, but when I want to feel something, I listen to the music that makes me feel good. It's as simple as that. Well, what was it, B.B. King that said, if you're feeling sad, go listen to the blues or listen to something that's sad, and it'll make you feel better. When we share information, we become familiar with each other, like you and I are doing now. So that's what we do as musicians. And when you've got comfort around that process, then you get the best of the best music, and it's wonderful for everybody. Why shouldn't there be pleasure around what we're doing? I know I'm describing something that maybe sounds obvious, but as a classical musician, and a lot of musicians, we learn in university to be very task-oriented and goal-oriented. And to me, that kind of music making, it takes a feeling out of the music. It becomes about the person, one person's view of how all the music should sound. So, for example, in these rehearsals for this last job I was on, I said, we're going to take up space when a person's soloing. Let's think of it as taking up audible space. When they realize that there's now everybody else is giving space, that person feels welcome to take up the space, the audible space, like when you're going to have a bass solo or a vocal solo. And so I'd say, instead of saying, hey, Cherie, sing loudly here, and everybody else sing pianissimo or play pianissimo, I said, at this point, we all want to allow Cherise to take up space. And so everybody automatically adjusts all the dynamics. So there's all of that stuff becomes built in, and it's based on everybody listening instead of one person, me, the quote unquote musical director, saying and having to just map out every song. Yeah, this is what we're going to do. No, it's up to everybody. And so now it becomes not about everybody managing what my directive, but it's about everybody using the natural skills that music allows us, which is being able to create on the spot and use our ears and our eyes and being aware of the other music makers in the room. And so all of the music was dovetailed and beautiful. Even those beautiful little details like that, everyone was paying attention to, and everyone felt a part of it. So it's wonderful to make those connections.
Pete Barker from the episode Our Minds Work.
There's these latent things in all of us, right? So there's things we want to say. There's things that bother us. There's things that cause us panic and anxiety or, fear, hatred, whatever. They're sort of just always boiling underneath. Mm-hmm. So it always just takes a few chords to kind of pull them out of you. And then if you find yourself just uttering, you just utter like one phrase over the chords, you're kind of like, that's exactly it. Music makes me happy, and so I do play it when I'm happy. So it's not just something that I kind of look to when I'm sad. As far as what am I going to pull from? What are these feelings that are boiling under the surface that these chords are going to pull out? A lot of those come from a lot of my own struggles, which with mental illness and things of that nature. If I have a place to go and say I want to die, that will always lift me up. And I feel like you usually get cut off from being able to put an emotion like that into the world. Like if you go to your shrink and you say, I want to die, they might be like, oh, hey, like calm down. Or if you go to a friend or a family member and you say something like that, you're going to worry them, So, in your average societal interaction, you can't sort of come forth with information like that. But music will always let you do that. If you listen to old blues singers or whatever, just something that severe, like a notion that severe, like I'm so unhappy I could die. Mm-hmm. You're free to say that, and in that there's something very cathartic about that. If you really want to release feelings, you unfortunately have to sort of push them off onto people. You can't. I mean, there is pleasure in just sort of screaming at the wall, But if you're not being heard, I don't think that the healing is really resolute. Everyone suffers kind of to different degrees, but I know that when people are angry, when they're depressed, when they dwell on thoughts for endless periods of time, or to the point where they're sort of incapacitated, stay in bed all day, things like that, that requires a lot of work. That's hard work. And I know that people who suffer know that, so I don't mean to condescend, but
Yep.
but that's hard work, and if you could find a way to refocus that work, you'll get a lot of happiness out of that, I think, and you'll find yourself creating things you didn't even know, you could. That has taken me like years to kind of do. So it's not like I could just sort of wake up one day and say, I'm not going to be unhappy today. I'm going to focus on work instead. So it's very much like a one foot in front of the other process. But even just the mindfulness of going, oh my God, I'm like working my ass off on my own suffering right now. How can I, I'm just going to go, I'm just going to go sing for a little bit, or I'm just going to go, strum my guitar for a little bit. Those periods, those sessions, they will pull something out of you, and I think that once you find the pleasure in that, you'll kind of go back. It's sort of like the being driven by the pleasure of it all, I think kind of will put you in that habit more frequently.
All aboard!
Kyle Gregory Price, member of the Lucky Trikes, and guest on the episode Let Go and Create.
I like a lot of humor and comedy in music, and I have a sentimental side too about me, but I like things that are jovial. That's why I work well with children. But at the same time, with that said, the Lucky Trikes aren't afraid to be sad. We're not afraid to be angry. We're not afraid to be afraid. And so it's not all, cookies and ice cream all the time with our band. We get emotional. And I think a lot of people forget that. They tend to mask grief. Adults tend to mask grief around children. And we need to be a point of security for them, but we also can't be afraid to show them that we feel the same things that they do, and then it's okay. Like, it's okay not to be okay sometimes. The one thing that we try to do for children is give them a vocabulary to express themselves. Like, how do you feel? Here are some words that might work. So they can emote it, so they can let it go. It's, a sense of catharsis for them. Because, as we get older, we're kind of forced to hide a lot of things. And I don't. I tend to wear my emotions on my sleeve. And that also makes it easier for me to work with children because I let them know how I'm feeling too at a given moment with grace, of course. I've met a lot of people who do have innate musical ability who unfortunately aren't doing anything with it. And for whatever reason, they're not doing anything with it. They choose not to, or they're just, I hate to say this, but lazy. Hard work is what's going to put the record together. I think with hard work that ability will happen. I mean, if you keep doing something over and over and over and over again, you're bound to get good at it. And that might take people a few years. It might take some people a few decades. But, I think I think about some musicians and artists who don't get known until they're older. And that might be for a combination of the fact that they just they didn't have that innate musical ability. I'll word it like that, when they were in their 20s or 30s, and it all came about when they were in their 60s, 70s, 80s. But that's just after perseverance. And I think ability can become innate with hard work. I feel to a certain degree, for me, there's a certain letting go involved too. And that letting go takes practice. I'm a firm believer that the music writes itself. And that takes time to really understand that. I sometimes I don't think I'm the one picking the harmonies and the melodies for my piece. I feel that the piece is picking the harmonies and melodies for itself. I'm just the one doing the work. If I may use the word vessel, for whatever it is that you might believe in, I think trauma helps us let go. I think loss helps us let go. If you read the biographies of a lot of artists, a lot of them really went through some shit. Whether it was war or famine or family issues or psychological issues. I mean, my God, the list is so long in regards to artists and composers and actors who have all sorts of mental disabilities, whatever it may be. I myself deal with bipolar disorder. we're trained not just as artists, but as humans. We just got to let go at a certain point, and I think that ability will shine through in our work. I'm a believer in the notion that our work represents our life, art represents life, and it represents an individual's life. The ability to let go is something you learn through life, and it's not just practicing your scales or knowing your color tones and your hues and or figure drawing for that matter. I mean, I associate doing rudiments and scales with figure drawing, where you have to practice drawing a figure, but then eventually through life and through that aforementioned hard work, you learn to let the figure draw itself. To perform what you're composing I personally get wrapped up in not just my lyrics, I then get wrapped up in the music that's behind it, and all of a sudden I'm on stage and I'm in front of people, and now I'm wrapped up in the execution of all of this stuff. And that's when I'm going to make some mistakes and go with it and consider it charming. And I like composing separate from performing because it's challenging. It allows me to get to know that instrument. And sometimes the musician, like I'll write for specific musicians too. I'll have them in mind. And then I do keep in mind them as a human. Like, what are they interested in? I kind of have this like gestalt approach to writing. I want to know as much about the musicians that I'm writing for as well as their instrument. I actually get a little anxiety performing other people's music because that's where the perfectionist comes out in me. And I've actually managed to satiate a lot of my perfectionism in regards to my own music. But when it comes to playing other people's work as a percussionist, it gives me some anxiety. It's like an actor saying somebody else's lines. You can do Shakespeare and either sound like a robot or you can sound like someone who really cares about the work at that point. So it's the same way some performers, I mean, like Yo-Yo Ma is a really great example. He'll play the Bach cello suites, and even though Bach wrote the music, Yo-Yo Ma brings it to life.
My friend Sammy from the episode Actor, Singer, and Dreamer Samuel Moscoso.
One of the things that makes music relatable is when songwriters write about shared experiences. That's why there are so many songs about love. You know, finding love, searching for love, sending love, sharing love. It's such a kind of a universal experience. So I think when you hear a song that inspires you, that you relate to, your own interpretation is unique to you, even though it's somebody else's song. You know, that's why there are some amazing singers that were interpreters or are interpreters, not necessarily songwriters, you know, like Whitney Houston, amazing interpreter. Celine Dion, amazing interpreter. She doesn't write her own music. And one of the things that I appreciate about Celine is that she's so grateful to songwriters because she recognizes that they give her something to sing and something to share and to, you know, the ability to express herself. I had just gone through or was going through a very deep transition in my life. And I needed to do something new. I needed to take action. I knew that I needed to make a change in my life, and I didn't know what that looked like. And so I was considering a handful of cities, and I landed on Los Angeles, and I packed a bag and got on a plane. So when I got there, I did not necessarily know, like, I know who I am and I know this is what I want to do and this is what I'm going to set forth, which, you know, in hindsight, you know, I'd like to say that I wish I could have done it differently, but I couldn't have, you know what I mean? You make the best decision that you can at the time with the information that you have. And when I got there, I needed to decompress and I needed to heal and I needed to just spend some time listening. So much of my life in Boston was so frenetic all the time. I wasn't creating enough space in my life to be creative. I got to LA and I was sort of like, I just need to just sit with this and sit with myself and just kind of meet people and learn the vibe and, you know, just kind of figure it out from there. This book I read kind of just before I moved to Los Angeles. It's when I was trying to make decisions. The book is called The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. And for me, I thought I understood meditation, until I read this book. And a lot of it talks about observing the thoughts and the voices and the noise in our head, not necessarily acting on them or giving them any value, but just observing all of these thoughts that just run through our brain. And so for me, being able to observe, like you said, just listening, not necessarily trying to change them, but observe and understand what's going on within you and taking kind of stock as to what's going on and listening. Really think about the times in your life, hopefully there have been some time in your life where you've felt the most connected, whatever that means to you, whether it's connected to your art, if you're a creative person, connected to your work, connected to your life. I think I've definitely experienced where I feel like I'm just going through the motions and I'm not really living my life. And I don't necessarily feel connected to my life. My life is just sort of happening around me and I'm just existing. If you find yourself in a place where you are stuck, where you don't know what to do, I think it almost doesn't matter what you do. The point is to do something, is to take action. Is that motivation comes after action.
Greg and Danny of the folk rock duo They Won't Win. Eager to Know episode, Sentimental Gentleman.
Danny and I would bring our song to the day. We would bring 2 voices and an acoustic guitar. And we would play the song for our musicians, our colleagues in the studio, our friends. And we would say, kind of, here's the emotion of the song. Here's what it is about. And then we would create some room for play. And so, and what we mean by that is we would just say, okay, let's play this together with that in mind. You've heard kind of the nature of the song, the basics of the song, the directionality of the song. And then we would play and we would all listen. It was a very active listening process. There'd come this moment often where the song would kind of then reveal itself to us and we'd say, oh, there it is.
Yeah.
And we all felt, it wasn't just me and Danny. It wasn't just our song at that point. It was all of our song because we had just created the sound of, the story was ours, but that's the sound of the song was something that was absolutely created collaboratively.
Something we learned, and this kind of cuts across many of the tracks, is we would be discovering and trying to figure stuff out, and then we'd realize that one particular instrument represented a particular part of the story. And so there were lots of one-on-one conversations with Kai on cello or with Ben on piano, where we'd say, Kai, in this story, you are that person trying to get out of this, or you are this, you are, or even you're part of the scenery. So when leaving London, imagine that you are the cobblestone streets and the rain falling, and so we would give a lot of the time. Sometimes it was just technical. It would be play this chord or play this note, but sometimes it was just play this feeling, and we, I guess, learned to just trust each other as a team to sort of allow each musician to interpret what that might mean.
Obviously, songs are meant to be heard. It's a relationship, right, with a creation and a listener. And now that the songs are made, they don't belong to us, right? They belong to anyone. It actually makes me want to cry a little bit. It's like they belong to anyone who listens to them and has any sort of reaction to them. And the reason I'm crying is recently one of the songs deals with some pretty tough stuff that happened in my life related to some domestic violence. And it was a very scary story to tell for me. But then to have a woman in California who had been passed on this song from a friend and had kind of heard some of the backstory of it, tell me that this song really touched her and that she was carrying it with her in her heart because she was in a similar place, and it gave her some hope that she could get to the next chapter. There's nothing more powerful than feeling something like that or hearing something from another human being when you've put yourself out there like that. That's
why we create anything, isn't it? I mean, on the one hand, we do create it for ourselves, right? But that really has to only be half of the of the creative experience. The other half is other people absorbing what you've created and having it change them in some way. Not that we have an agenda, not that we're trying to change people in particular ways, because we can't control that, but the idea that we can create something that someone else finds beautiful or thought-provoking or deeply even sad or cathartic in some way, I think that's what the human experience is supposed to be. I think that's why we're all supposed to be in the world, to just connect with each other, and this is just one way to do that.
We all know there's different styles of painting. There's very photorealistic painting, there's figurative painting, there's all manner of different styles. In the same way, some of our songs, War I will use as an example, is a little bit more of a straightforward, like, here is a story song. This is an honest depiction of something that happened, right? Lost at Sea is a little bit more of a figurative painting.
It's more loose.
It's loose, and it's meant to be, so that the listener can go in from all manner of angles and experience it and feel it in different ways, but hopefully with that mood we are trying to convey of the magic of the sea and being lost and the beauty of lost love.
Anne Lamott wrote about this in her book Bird by Bird on fiction writing, that you have to sort of learn to love the shitty draft. You have to expect that the first thing that comes out is not going to be even close to perfect, but if there's something in you that just needs to be out there, get it out there, and then keep working on it and keep working on it and keep working on it, because eventually, even if it takes a long time, eventually you're going to create something beautiful, but you have to get it out of yourself first.
What you create is a very personal gift to the world. Not everyone is going to love it. It is not going to be everyone's cup of tea. And that's a very logical thing if we all think about it, right? We don't all love every single song we hear. We don't all love every single movie that we see. But those songs and those movies are super personal to the people who created them, right? But if we can have that relationship with our art, that be proud of it, be bold in putting it out there, tell your stories, understand that some people will connect with them, right? But it's okay that not everyone connects with them, and that's just part of the world of creativity. And I think a lot of people get trapped in the idea of they hear any kind of feedback to the negative and they go into a hole of not wanting to put more out, and it's the exact opposite.
Get a little bit closer.
Brian Cluchet of Best Man in the Eager to Know episode titled No Jacket Required.
There's part of me that just wants to sit behind a computer or behind a board, as they would say, like, you know, and produce music and engineer and create. There's also a part of me that really, really enjoys performing live. When I see people dancing to my music, I know that can kind of be involuntary. That foot tapping or that little bit of head movement or something like that. They're not maybe not necessarily jamming out per se, but I can see that maybe I'm connecting, you know, taking it further than that to see people smiling and enjoying what you're doing is probably one of the strongest feelings, because it's immediate.
Yeah.
Right. You're seeing gratification essentially, like immediately. And I think that feeds the energy that's happening, and then you are reacting with your other musicians on stage, and all of a sudden it just becomes this big kind of this collection of energy and emotion between the entire room. And there can be some I guess trite elements of saying that, you know, we do this for the fans kind of thing.
Yep.
You know, there's a little bit of truth to that.
Yeah.
You know, I want to elicit a reaction from people, preferably positive.
Yeah.
And I think that as a performer or performing artist, I should say, that's probably the strongest kind of gratification that you can get, is to see it as it's happening. I have seen it in an aspect which is a very powerful experience, is when you are creating something and you're feeling it, right? And you're feeling very positive about it, and then you do push it out there, and to not get a reaction or to see the maybe illicit is tough. And I mean, I can think of a few shows where we were debuting something that we've worked on for a few weeks, and you're feeling really good about it, and it's a late night and half the room walks out. It might not necessarily been that it was terrible by any means, but all of a sudden people realized, hey, I can go grab a drink. Hey, I want to go have that conversation or something. So that's that critique that is immediate, that all of a sudden takes the energy away.
Yeah.
And I'll be truthful, it can definitely feel emotional, because that's something that you're passionate about, and you're, I mean, I can only assume that that as you become more experienced with that, and that you can tend to maybe brush it off, or maybe you never do. Whether you're working at CDW or whether you're on a garbage truck, if you're passionate about being creative, it's really important to have that. Some people have it at home and it's their scrapbook collection or something like that. There are other people that choose to share it. And I think that some people don't understand that when you do choose to share it, for the most part, it could be a very vulnerable experience.
Yes.
And that's because you want your passions to translate with others, because why wouldn't someone else get excited about this thing, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And especially when you put a lot of effort into it, I think that it's definitely important to get some kind of reaction, because then you feel, well, maybe, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Or why am I sharing it, at least? I think that the slightest bit of motivation that you can get when you are passionate about something, whether it be someone's reaction to it, or someone just gives you a little positive feedback, it really has the ability to push you further, I think. And it might just be the slightest little bit, but for me, I think that's the most, that tells me that it is something that's important to me. Is because, all I need is a little bit of feedback or a little bit of positive reinforcement.
Yeah.
And it just really propels me. There was a large group of people that came to see us because they had actually saw us at one of our last shows randomly. They did not come to see us. And I was at the bar after the show, and guy came up to me. He was like, oh, awesome job kind of thing. I was like, oh, very cool. Like, who'd you come to see tonight? And he goes, you. And I went, really? it might not sound like much. I was like, wow, that's kind of surprising and cool. And that means that, if I'm reaching in my little sphere, just a few folks, sometimes that's enough. But obviously, I want to be able to, have the biggest impact that I can. And so, that those little bit of those experiences, those little reactions that I have from people, it just has the ability to kind of to lift up a bit and push and hopefully create enough motivation. Because I think as an independent artist in any field, that motivation factor is really, really important.
Composer Wellington Laura.
I think learning the piano and understanding it and making music and melodies helped to unlock and activate this part of my brain that I never really kind of knew existed, and was like a doorway. It was like, whoa, what the heck is that? It was really interesting. It's hard to remember moments, but like as a kid, but it's like you could feel it, where it's just like you just felt something shift, and you're like, wait, something's different here. At least for me. Did you ever see the movie The Matrix?
Yes.
Okay. So you remember the code that was kind of the green coding that would fall down the screen? Think of like the green coding as like all the everyday noise of like life, And then I'd see one little code that was just different enough for me to pay attention to. Nice. And I'd be like, what? It's like you go in for a closer look, like, what is that? And it's like, you know, you being told to take the red pill or blue pill, and it's like, oh, there's something else there, something trying to break through to send me a message. And I think we as people are conditioned in the society that we're in, we don't really pay attention to these things sometimes. And I guess it broke through enough for me to pay attention to and actually listen.
Thank you, Wellington. I think something broke through for all of the guys on this episode, and I am glad to be able to share them with you. Be sure to explore all 6 full Eager to Know episodes for these past guests. My name is Ricky McGuckran, and you have been listening to Eager to Know, the podcast. If you haven't already, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join me next week for another Eager to Know podcast.